Yo, what's poppin'? Got three NA games today. Two of them were a bit of a roll, I'm going to be honest, but the last one is very thrilling, so stick around for that if you're interested. And the second one is it's a bit interesting because it was not what I expected personally. I had higher hopes for a certain team. So first up is a Florida Mayhem against a Paris Eternal. It is a 3-0 for Florida, and no one's surprised here, right? Florida playing Hydron, Checkmate, Someone, Servajet, Rupel. Paris playing Dove, Malthel, Cry, Rakitak, and Lucamino. No surprise that it's a 3-0. I don't think so, for me at least. So Florida win Li Jiang 2-0. That mark is 100 to 81. So Dove is once again losing an Ultrich to the point. Hydron literally lapped him in overclock. According to my eyeballs, Hydron had 283 charged ultimate, so that doesn't count before he used it and he had it charged, compared to 130 for Dove and 181%. Literally overlapped him, Malthel is dying early every fight, also, whether it be to Hydron, to Checkmate, whoever it is. And the Paris Core are just fighting for their lives. Because honestly, Cry, Rakitak, and Luke Mino got them that 81%. Like, yeah, sure, Dove did. Nah, Dove didn't do anything. Malthel did come alive in a few fights. But to me, I think Rakitak and Luke Mino really did kind of drag them through this a little bit. And get them their 81%, but that's about it. Really poor performance from the DPS, and that is going to continue throughout this series. Control centers 100 to 80 for Florida. Checkmate runs out on the far, and Paris do a very good job here. I got to give them credit where I can because it's very hard to. They recognize the far and they play very fast, and they run into Florida, and they end up winning the fight quite handedly. Florida does win once they get to the mirror, and they easily make it to 99% before Paris wins the ultimate fight in the end. But then Florida come back, they take down Cry, and they run up on the rest of Paris. Hydron just effortlessly gunning down the streets of Paris. Checkmate even jumps off the map in the overtime, and Florida still win, man. They still win. Even with a little bit of extra help. So Midtown ends up being a 3-2 for Paris. For Florida. Is that true? No, it's not a 3-2. It's a 1-0. My goodness, I gotta double check these more. Paris on their offense, they're playing against the double flex support from Florida. So Dove ends up opening with a pick onto someone, so shout out to Dove for that. Florida end up backing up, and they give about 84% to Paris, while Florida wait. Then someone returns, Florida just run up onto the point, and Paris just get bulldozed, completely rolled. Then Dove swaps over to the Tracer in an effort to deal with the double flex support. It doesn't really work out. They basically don't get any more progress, and nothing really happens for them for the next, 3 minutes, I would say. And Cry did not get an ult that entire round. So that just tells you, the engagements that Paris are having, they're just not even really happening because Cry's not getting any damage out. Normally, even in this meta, the damage is pretty even, right? It's pretty even overall because of how brawly these fights are. But whenever Cry just has 74% on his ult or something after 4 minutes, something's up, right? It's not that even. On Florida's offense, Paris actually do a pretty decent hold for 3 minutes. They're getting good picks. Florida's not really engaging properly. They're a little bit separated. Dove gets some good stuff going. And to me, it looked like Florida was going to build up 5 ultimates and then try and win. But then Sermajet ends up beating a losing fight. So I'm like, that's a little weird and a little risky for no reason. And then the next fight, Malthel blades, and well, you could just wipe here and then go in with your ult's next fight because you still have time. But they choose to just brute force through it with their own not beat anymore, rally in their other ults. And it works out in the end, but I think it was a very unnecessary risk that Florida took there because it's just 84%. That's a single fight win, right? I don't really understand it, but it gets them their win, and maybe they're like, oh, it's Paris. We'll just go for it. I don't know. But that could have been a Paris win. Realistically, Paris could have had this map. Gibraltar ends up being a 3-2 for Florida. Paris on their offense are also playing the Ashe Zen Ana. Or no, Florida on the defense are playing the Ashe Zen Ana with Paris playing the Widow on a Zen, which is the same thing, basically, except the Widow. And Florida are very quick to give away the high ground, and they'll just set up in the server room. This ends up working out quite well for them because it gives no angles to Dove on the Widowmaker, basically. So it's all onto Cry and Malthel to really dig in onto that server room, and they're just unable to get it. Dove finally does get walls after nearly 3 minutes. And Malthel almost does something with Blade to force him out of server room, but it's just too little. It's not even too little too late. It's just not not actually moving them enough, not getting enough damage, not forcing enough resources for to really discourage Florida. Also, this says 3-2 again, but it's literally 1-0. I don't know why it said 3-2 again. That's just a lie. I said it too. I don't know. So anyway, Florida goes to the offense. Hydron goes on the Widowmaker, and honestly, not a lot happens again for a while. Paris also playing the double flex support. But yeah, so not a lot's happening. But then Hydron gets away into server room. He digs his way through like a little rat, and Hydron kills 3. Florida end up winning after a bit. So down to play the match, it just has to be Hydron. Maybe the largest Sojourn diff ever. That's got to be an overstatement because Guerrero played a little bit, but not in this match, obviously, but in the past. I'm sure there was a larger one, but this one felt really bad. It felt like Hydron was just walking in and was uncontested and he's playing Kovacs, right? There are some cool Widow plays too. It's always nice to see some Widowmaker gameplay. Where this meta is so bad that I am praising Widowmaker gameplay. That is crazy to me. But yeah, gotta be Hydron. He was just walking. He was having an absolute field day. So overall, the Paris DPS got gapped harder than they did against New York, which kind of surprises me, but I see it. I'll defend the backline for Paris a little bit because what more could they really do? Like I don't love double flex support, but I see it for Paris because I think that their support line is their strongest point. So it makes sense to try and get them onto maybe more impactful characters if you get a good 5 orb or you get a good Discord, sleep, things like that. I don't think that double flex support is actually good, even when Florida's playing it. I don't think it's actually good. But it does force other teams to play a little bit differently. And so I think it's worth, for a team like Florida and Paris even, I think it's worth doing because you're not going to win the mirror. You're just not. But it doesn't work out really for Paris at all. And Florida just kind of walked through Paris like their ants. Hydron could have had his eyes closed and still dipped. Checkmate was just literally jumping off the map and still winning the overtime. So I don't know. Also, if it looks like I'm forward, it's because there's literally a cat on my chair. He's just sitting back here. I don't know what he's doing. Maybe if he moves around a little bit, I'll pick him up, but that's for that. So next up is the Washington Justice against the Houston Outlaw. So I have this wrong. Hold on. Okay, so fix the map thing. So that was just grossly incorrect. So Washington, Houston, 3-0 for Houston. I personally predicted a 3-2 for Washington. Washington playing Assassin, the Kid Kalios, Krillin, and opener. Houston playing Merit, Pelican, Dante, Lastro, and Lep. So no surprises there. Houston do technically have creative they could play, I guess, but I don't think he was going to get any play time no matter what. So there's that. Anyway, Busan is a 2-0 for Houston. Sanctuary, it's a very close. This is what I expected for the rest of the series. 100-99 for Houston. It's looking really good. Washington are applying pressure heavily on Dante. He's not able to do things. They get the first cap. Decade's finding good opening picks. Houston end up winning the ultimate fight whenever Washington's at 99. But that's okay because Kalios still has a rampage. He hits it first. He gets a better rampage, but Merit ends up clutching up. So Merit goes crazy, and Houston maintain point control. Then Assassin blades into no beat from left. He doesn't have it, and Assassin doesn't go deep. I think he was trying to bait out a barrier that was just like 10% off or something. So I understand that. But it costs them because they just use a very powerful ultimate and got nothing for it, basically. It looks like Washington's winning. They're turning the fight. They force Houston off the point, and they C9 it. And it's all ruined. And from there, I don't know if a Washington mental exploded or what went wrong, but it just never came back. Nothing like that ever comes up again. Downtown is 167 for Houston. Honestly, reading that number, I'm surprised it was that close remembering the match. Houston, early press, deep aggression into the Washington spawn. They go into the spawn, they come back and cap the point. And from there on out, Houston just make it very difficult for Washington to approach. Merit is having good off angles. You have Pelican had a great game on the Genji. Yeah, so Washington end up winning in overtime off of a Krillin boop onto Pelican. So if that doesn't happen, they probably don't even get any percentage. But then they get it. They hold a little bit with ultimates. Then Merit ends up getting a pick on Assassin, and Houston rotate point as Washington give it up because they're like, oh, we're down Assassin, so we can't win. And then as Washington try to approach the point, Pelican hits a good blade, and Houston end up winning out. and it never gets better. Pariso is a 1-0. It says Washington. This is supposed to say Houston. I tried this earlier, and I was like, oh, surely Washington can come back, and then it just never happened. So that's why that's it. But anyway, Washington, on their offense, Pelican gets caught out, and Washington looked to take the Roomba side point, and Dante gets a little bit disconnected from his team, from his back line, and he ends up dying. But then Houston are still able to clean up Washington because Pelican comes back, and Merritt does enough damage that Washington just can't stand on the point, can't cap it out. Then Opener decides to beat down one the next fight into a rally, and they just lose. And Decay is getting no picks this whole time. Nothing to show for it. Washington were almost gifted that first point, and they by Pelican, and they don't get it at all. And then on Houston's offense, they just run to the point. Merritt gets a kill on Kalios. Washington crumble and win. And at this point of the series, Assassin has 4 final blows total and 13 deaths, which is insane to me. He's a Genji with 4 final blows across 2 cost points and an entire Pariso. Junkertown ends up being a 2-1 for Houston. Washington on their offense. Houston gets a spawn hold on them. It goes on for quite a while, and Pelican's just going crazy, chaining the dashes back and forth. Kalios is often disconnected from his team because he's so aggressive, and he just has no warrant for his life, so he just walks. Pelican just kills him. And they end up getting over to B eventually, but it's not pretty. And so I have very much a limp, and then Houston come up. This time there is a difference. It's not just Sojourn for Sojourn. You have Decay on Sojourn with Merritt on Ash, which I think is a little interesting, but ends up not mattering really because Washington's spawn hold gets broken immediately because Kalios, once again, the aggression is just unwarranted. He just goes, and then he dies. So Washington ends up holding at the bridge because Dante had a bit of an overextension, and he gets shut down. So then Houston back up, and then a crazy clip comes through. Merritt overclock just wins. It just wins. He kills like 3 with it. He's sliding in. He's going crazy. And then Houston just have more ults because all they used was overclock really, and they end up winning. And that's the series. Thompson player of the match is gonna be Merritt. Oh, that's wrong too. Hold on, that's not something. But anyway, Merritt has to be Merritt because the huge consistent picks from Merritt is crazy. He's just been elite. There's so much pressure on the Kalios in the game, and overall, right? I'm going to talk about this because it's so important. Kalios just walks, bro. Like normally, Washington have the issue where, they're not actually walking. Kalios has decided, okay, the problem with that is that we're not walking, so I'm just going to perma walk the entire time. It's not a great strategy because with how much pressure's on him, you really have to pick and choose when you want to be aggressive, and you have to have some support from that, whether it be your Genji or your Sojourn hitting something. There has to be some reason for it. Or at least if you're going to be the way to get pressure onto the team as the Junker Queen, you have to have your Sojourn or your Genji capitalize on it, and it just never happened. Nothing was happening. I don't know if you want to blame that on Kalios, if you want to blame that on the DPS not capitalizing on the aggression Kalios is doing. I'm choosing to put it on both of them because I think they both played very poorly. Yeah, because like Kalios would just walk up and Merritt would just shoot him in the head. Like that's it. That's just how it happened. Anyway, Washington did look even with Houston on that first round of Bluestone Sanctuary. But that tragic C9 changed the entire thing. I don't know. Maybe if Washington don't C9 there, they come back, a quick 3-0, their mental's intact. Assassin doesn't have 4 final blows after 2 maps. But that's it. Houston had more aggression. They had better placed aggression. Maybe not more, but they had better placed aggression. Because Kalios was an aggressive guy, right? Merritt was clicking his heads better. Pelican was finding the perfect dice, and it's kind of the combination between them. Merritt would be so good at hitting them, and then Pelican would be able to finish them off and just chaining. And Assassin couldn't live. He couldn't kill anything. He didn't do anything. He wasn't healing. Anything he was trying to do got shut down by Lastro and Lev, and they had a really great game. Lastro specifically, I think he had a really great game shutting down Assassin. Because it's not like Assassin was just playing poorly and that's just it. It also needs the Brigitte on the other side to really shut him down. And it was very good from him, I think. But yeah, I've already talked about Kalios enough, and I'm very disappointed with Decay's play. Special shout out to Decay's play because he really needed to get some picks, especially like Pariso offense. I was like, come on, Decay, just get a pick, and it opens the whole thing up. And it just never happened, never came. Merritt was just diffing him. He wasn't finding it on supports or anywhere. His team needs him to get them. So yeah, Houston did a great job playing off of Washington, and they never really changed their game plan. That's one thing also about Washington. They never changed what their game plan was from map to map, and they just kept dying for it. So yeah, now going on to the banger of a series, the Vancouver Titans against the Boston Uprising. So it ends up being a 3-2 reverse sweep for Boston. And this is very special because they have just fired their head coach, right? So Boston are playing Valentine, Seeker, Pump, Faith, and Crimson. And it looks good. It looks so good. But especially in the back half, it looks good. Because starting off with Lee Jong is a 2 over Vancouver. So it wasn't, maybe not off the rip, because of course it was reverse sweep. So the first two are going to Vancouver. So control center is 100-99. Seeker gets the opening pick, and he's getting good entry picks the entire time. But Vancouver fight back. Boston aren't really capitalizing on it as much at this point, and Spire is on top. Spire is still outperforming Seeker at this point, and that's what I expect. I don't expect Seeker to go crazy right now. Spire has been in the league longer. He's been consistently one of the best Sojourns in the league. He should have this matchup, and he does right now. And then there's a point where Crimson gets caught way out as Boston try to kind of away from an Aztec rally. This is when they have the point. I think I should mention that probably. And that's just an example of maybe Crimson not being on the same page and still some disconnect with this team. But it cost them. And then Boston overcommit with ults on a lost fight. And then Vancouver have more ults. So they overpower them. They end up winning 199. But it was a pretty contested series. Or map, rather. What are you doing? Huh? I'm going to pick you up. If you're still watching the video, here's the cat. Look at him. In the soup. He's stupid. He doesn't know what's going on. I'll set you back here. There you go, buddy. Anyway, on the Gardens, 100-0 for Vancouver. They opened the point out by Aztec hitting a huge boop on the punk off the map, and that kind of sets the whole tone, kind of steamrolls them backwards. Vancouver just never lets go. Even when Seeker is able to find a pick onto Aspire, is able to diff him, Boston just aren't able to move in and capitalize on it. And then Aspire is able to come back with an overclock and win. That's kind of the biggest thing. Seeker was still finding picks at this point. It wasn't apparent that he was going to become ultra level or whatever, but ended up being a 2-0 for Vancouver on Lejean. Then we go over to Midtown, which is a 1-0 for Vancouver. A pretty poor performance both ways. So Aspire is on the Ashe against Seeker on the Sojourn on Vancouver's offense. I disagree with this. I don't think Vancouver should be playing Aspire on Ashe. That's just not the identity as a team. Ashe is for more calculated, more macro positioning, like teams like Dallas Fuel, Toronto Defiant, teams like that. Vancouver is more, Aspire is able to get you big picks with his aggression and things like that. But so yeah, I don't rate the Ashe as much for Vancouver, just because I think you need Aspire to be able to step up and just one-shot people. Anyway, Seeker is finding very good picks on Vancouver as they're trying to entry throughout the round. And Aspire hits a big dynamite and a bob to get Vancouver through A. But on B, it slows down because the Boston backline ends up living through whatever Vancouver's throwing at them, and they get held. It's just the Ashe wasn't. I think it was mainly the Ashe because Sojourn is what, and Aspire specifically is what is propelling Vancouver to be good, right? To higher heights out of the basement. So putting him on Ashe all of a sudden, King's not good enough to play the Ashe, I think. And neither is Mirror, I would say. Because realistically, Vancouver is just Aspire. That's not true, I guess, but Aspire plays a large part in why Vancouver is good. Going over to Boston offense, they're back on the Sojourn Mirror. And Aspire is playing super aggressive. This is what you want to see from him. He's moving in and around Boston, and Boston are struggling to break through Vancouver. And it's not even like they're switching it up. Vancouver's just always taking the fight to them right in the underpass, and Boston's just not getting enough value from their ultimates, specifically the support ultimates, when they need to, and they're committing to disadvantageous fights. And that's what cost them this round. They weren't able to brute force their way through. They weren't able to find picks to get through. And Vancouver were just taking it to them, setting tempo. So going over to Dorado, this is where the reverse sweep begins. The 2-1 for Boston. And now Vancouver on their offense, they're back on the Ashe again. Ashe versus Ashe. And I'm still not gonna like it, but that's how it is. Boston don't close hold, which is a little interesting. You see most teams do the close hold here. Um, they just play on the standard high ground. Seeker comes up big with big shots, throw both through good shots onto the and picks and stuff like that, and big dynamites to prevent Vancouver from moving in. Because anytime a dynamite comes out from Seeker, Vancouver is forced back and they're not able to aggress as they want to. And the Ash on the other side just doesn't have that same value at this point because it's not like it's easy to hit because a lot of the core members of the team are still on the high ground and they can drop down. It's much harder to hit that dynamite up high, especially when they can drop down and aggress whenever they please. Punk is also doing a great job stepping into space that Mira wants to take and letting him get hit by the dynamite there and taking the fights in those locations. I don't know what Bang wants to claim when dynamite comes out. Well, I don't know what that. Oh, up here. Oh, it's not connected. Okay. Only when Aspire is able to get a kill on the Seeker is when Vancouver is able to progress through A. But then King is very far forward. He gets caught out, and Boston is able to get on top of Vancouver, and Vancouver ends up getting held at the bridge on B. And then we go over to Boston, and it's Ash versus Ash again, and Vancouver gets a close hold for 3 minutes before Boston end up breaking it with ults. And critically, using less ultimates than Vancouver did during the spawn hold. So even though they do have to use like 3 ults to get through, Vancouver used 4. So that gives them the ultimate advantage. Seeker is then able to kill 3 to get Boston through A and make them hold their ult still. King whips another blade on B, and Vancouver drop onto Boston and lose. And then Valentine hits a big blade, ends up winning out and securing the map for Boston. So it begins. Then going over to Coliseum, it's a 140 to 91 for Boston. They complete the map. And I did not expect this because Vancouver get the early lead, but Seeker ends up dominating, and Boston gets sent back to the checkpoint, and they take the lead. Mira hits a rampage to send Vancouver the other way, but well, there's no but. I guess the aggressive positioning from Vancouver then lets them get the control point as well. But that's not it, I suppose, because Boston are able to get the control back and they just go really. There is a bit more back and forth with Coliseum, but it's very boring and it's all the same thing basically. And this comes down to Seeker was performing very well. Aspire was also performing well, but Seeker was performing better at this point, and he was able to absolutely roll Vancouver when it mattered and complete the map for Boston. And that's it. Like, I could say, oh, so their ultimates and the aggression and things like that, but Seeker was better more often than Aspire, wins them more fights without using more ultimates, and that's why Boston gets to 140. And then Nepal. To complete the reverse sweep or to stop it if you're Vancouver ends up being a 2-1 for Boston. Vancouver do a good job off the rip. They're on Sanctum 100 to 51. Very aggressive gameplay from Boston. Setting up King for success. He has probably the best round of the series at this point. And Boston ended up sticking around for a bunch of trades in a very long, drawn-out fight, which gets Mira separated from the backline whenever he has to contest a point. And Boston end up flipping for a good 51%. But Boston do some misplays where they set tempo with DPS ults and beat. But Mira is able to rampage, able to trade out, and ends up with just the supports brawling on the point. Just the Lucios and the Brigidas going to town. But nicely, or as it works out, King is able to come back first because he was the first one to die in the fight. He has a blade, and he gives the point back over to Vancouver, and Aztec gets back, ends up rallying and winning out. So I think Boston got a little over aggressive, blew a little too much all at once with the ultimates there, and it cost them. Because if they had even one more ultimate throughout that fight after the rampage, they'd probably win it, and they can continue their build-up process. But anyway, it doesn't matter, because Village is 100 though. King rolls out on May, and it is poor, because Seeker gets an insta-kill on the King, which is huge. That would have been the best fight for May. If May is able to control that point, it's a whole different ballgame. But because he dies, instead, Vancouver tried to commit to the May. They should have swapped off right away because if May trying to attack a point is dog, literally dog. They keep trying to do that, but Vancouver are forced to use resources just to get to the point, and even then, they're drained of resources, and most of the time, someone still ends up dying to Seeker or to Valentine or somehow. Maybe even a Punk Rampage, things like that. It just doesn't work. Eventually, Vancouver do go off of the May, but it's the last fight, and it just doesn't work out because you're resetting your ultimate, and just a poor decision making from Vancouver, or at least an unlucky time. It was unlucky for King to get picked first, probably in that very first fight, but it was unskillful for him not to have switched off after that first fight. He just has to ditch it because the May's not going to win. Shrine ends up being, that's not true. Hold on. Okay, sorry about that. Shrine is 100-71 for Boston. Seeker gets a little over aggressive and ends up trading for Massa, or it could have been a knife, one of the two. Either way, he's not in the spot he should be, and he gets a kill for it, but it doesn't matter. Boston ended up falling over because Aspire is able to go crazy with no Seeker on the other side. Aspire is still playing well, just Seeker is playing better, right? And when Miro dies just before Massa is able to drop the beat, so Aspire tries to make up for that by hitting the overclock, but he doesn't get anything, and Vancouver end up committing two very impactful ultimates in a lost fight. This gives Boston control of the point and sets them up for success because Punk is able to hit a sick rampage next fight, and then Boston keep control. Then Seeker kills 4 with his overclock. They're able to keep control again, and then in a final fight, Vancouver try to run up the right side, but it just doesn't happen. They're able to brawl in there. King ends up falling early. Crimzo hits massive cleave. He's just doing so much damage, so much healing in there, and Boston complete the reverse sweep. So, contemplating match has to go to Seeker all day. I did not expect him to be this good. He cleared Aspire in the back half. And the front half, a bit more contested, but even then, he was still finding really good first picks. I just think Boston wasn't capitalizing on it as much. But he still picked it up in the second half. I don't know if he shook off the nerves, if he was just getting warmed up. Whatever it was fantastic. And I am very, very intrigued to watch out for him more in the next stage. Overall, Vancouver came out as the better team off the rip, but Boston got into it and it was over. And even then, on that second map, Boston didn't complete Midtown. They did get stopped on second. It's just that they were able to get a better defense. Vancouver went dominant by any means on the first 2 maps. It's just they were a little bit better, a little bit more concise, a little bit better aggression and things like that. But one Sojourn player can just turn the tides of all that. And that's one thing that you can love or hate about this meta is that the Sojourn players do decide a lot when they decide to. I also, again, want to criticize putting Aspire on Ashe as much. I don't see it. I think if you just put Aspire on Sojourn, he can do so much more for this team. He adds more value. And it doesn't work out for them when they switch it off. I'm going to keep an eye out for them come the tournament. To see if they'll be on the Ashe or not. I hope not, I think. And the May pick, just switch off, bro. I don't care what your game plan is. You have to get off the May after that first fight if it doesn't work. If it's not going to work on the first fight, it is sure as hell not going to work attacking the point. Another big reason for Vancouver's loss is not just Seeker versus Aspire. Because it was in Seeker's favor, right? I've been saying it the whole time. It's been in Seeker's favor. But also Valentine compared to King. Valentine is way better at cleaning up the kills that Seeker is able to set up, whereas King not nearly as much. He struggled a lot this series, even on his best maps. It wasn't like perfect by any means, and Valentine definitely outperformed him significantly. And that, in conjunction with Seeker outperforming and the DPS line as a whole being more synergistic on Boston somehow, yeah, it was much better for Boston in that sense. And even more, I think Punk was better than Mir overall. I think he was positioned better. I think he had better rampages still. And I think his knives were more often better than they weren't. And the positioning that he applied was very strong. And I said that Crimzo had a good game. Crimzo did struggle a little bit at the start. I do think the backline also picked it up a little bit in the second half for Boston. But I think it was solid overall. But not too much of a difference between the two backlines, I would say. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Like this video if you like it, subscribe for more daily Overwatch League content. Have yourself a good one. Deuces.